Hi there, and welcome, Red Eyes members. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you along. We are talking with Eric Phelps, author of Vatican Assassins. And I want to continue on this segment to talk a little bit more about the Knights of Malta and actually try to sort a few things out about them. I'm having trouble, in a way, sorting out the different branches, and this is a very eclectic secret society when it comes to the naming of this. The Knights of Malta, as I understand, is kind of the overarching name, but then we have, of course, the SMOM, or the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and this is a Catholic order. We have even the Order of St. John, the Order of the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem. We also have the Knights Hospitallers. And I also want to mention that under Freemasonry, under the York Rite, at the top three levels, first we have Order of the Red Cross. Second from the top we have Order of Knights of Malta. Then at the very top there is Order of Knights Templar. Eric, as you explained in our first segment, you talked about the connection between Freemasonry, of course, and the Vatican. So this becomes kind of a dough point here, so to speak. But I mean, it's yet at the surface, it's all these different names, and at the lower level, at least, it seems to be somewhat divided. Can you help us clarify all of this a little bit? Have you kept track of all of this, Eric?
Sure. We have to go back and examine the Crusades if we are going to understand these present secret societies. So, to begin with, the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, also called the Knights Hospitallers, were established in 1099, and they were established by a man called Blessed Gerard. He is considered the first Grand Master and the founder of the Sovereign Military Order of the Knights Hospitallers. They later would be called the Knights of Rhodes, Rhodes, and then after they would be driven from Rhodes by the Muslims, they went to Malta, and they were called then the Knights of Malta. So their first and foremost title is the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem of the Hospital. So they're also called Hospitallers.
Right.
And it was a military order from the very beginning.
Yeah. It
was not a bunch of missionaries going to secure the way for people to come to Jerusalem, for the quote-unquote people making their pilgrimages. Their purpose was, as a military order, involved with the First Crusade and the other Crusades, was to take Jerusalem from the Muslims. That was their first and foremost purpose. And that purpose has never ceased to exist. So they were started in 1099. Knights of Malta were started then, 1099, and they were involved with the First Crusade. And then later they were called the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which is what they're called today. The Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was founded, and then you have a second crusading order called the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, and those are the Knights Templars, revived as Freemasonry in 1717, and these Knights Templars were founded in 1117, about 18 years after the Knights of Malta, the Knights Hospitallers. And the purpose of the Knights Templars was not only to take Jerusalem from the Muslims, but to rebuild Solomon's temple. That was their purpose. Therefore, and this is why every Masonic lodge is patterned and built after a mini Solomon's temple.
Yes.
So therefore, the purpose for these Knights Templars, who are the world's greatest bankers, is to build or rebuild Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. The Third Crusading Order, they were called the Knights of St. Mary of Jerusalem, and these were what we would call the Teutonic Knights, and they were German. And these Teutonic Knights were started in 1119, 2 years after the establishment of the Knights of the Temple of Solomon. But this was, I said, a German order only for German knights, and these Teutonic Knights were abolished by Napoleon in around 1806, but they were revived by Himmler with his SS.
Right.
The SS of Himmler were the Teutonic Knights. And that's why they use the German runic SS's for their symbol on their collars. So it was just like the Teutonic Knights were a crusading order, the SS was a crusading order controlled by the Pope. Although it was modeled after the Jesuits, as Himmler says, and as you can read in Heinz Honey's great work, The Order of the Death's Head, written in 1966. So you have three major crusading orders. The Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, also called the Hospitallers, Knights of Rhodes, Knights of Malta. The second being the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templars, later called Freemasons. And the third being the Knights of St. Mary's of Jerusalem, called the Teutonic Knights, later called the SS. So of these three crusading orders, we will then focus on the Knights of Malta because they are, in fact, the most powerful of today.
And under that branch, would you also put the Sovereign Military Order of Malta?
That's right. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta is its formal name, and the men who are part of it are called the Knights of Malta.
Right, okay.
The Sovereign Military Order of Malta is located in Rome. It has a capital in Rome.
The Aventine Hill, I think their headquarters is...
Aventine Hill.
Yeah.
That's right. It's Aventine Hill. And so that is where the Grand Council meets on Aventine Hill.
Yeah.
And the Knights of Malta control the world's drug trade. They control the world's banking systems. They control the world's international intelligence community. And underneath them are certain high Freemasons. But the Knights of Malta control all of that.
When you say that they control the drug trade, give us a little bit more background on that, if you will.
Okay. It's the Black Pope's drug trade. The Jesuit order, the Black Pope controls the drug trade, and he uses the papacy to organize it and to carry it out. And the soldiers of the papacy, the high, powerful soldiers, are the Knights of Malta. And this is an international drug trade that the papacy has conducted since no later than the opium trade that the British conducted on behalf of the papacy into China for the destruction of the Chinese people, for the purpose then of overthrowing the Manchu dynasty, the Manchus being the very powerful enemies of the Jesuits. The Manchus hated the Jesuits. And so then the Jesuits had to overthrow the last of the Manchu leaders in around 1912. But as a precursor to that, they had to weaken the Chinese nationalism and to weaken the Chinese people, so they addicted them to opium and had their opium wars run into China. And who did they run the opium wars with? Why, Skull and Bones.
Right.
So this connection to Skull and Bones with the Knights of Malta cannot be overlooked because Bonesman George Herbert Walker Bush is a Knight of Malta. His brother Prescott Bush Jr. is a Knight of Malta. William F. Buckley was a Bonesman and a Knight of Malta. You have very powerful ties to the Bonesmen and the Knights of Malta, many of them being knights themselves. So they ran the drug trade in the 1800s, and now they ran it entirely during the 20th century, because the drug trade that goes on in this country, in the American Empire, is overseen and directed by the Central Intelligence Agency, working in conjunction with the Mafia. And we make this connection when we understand the Kennedy assassination. So as the Central Intelligence Agency, which is run by the Knights of Malta, works in conjunction using the Pope's Italian Roman Catholic Mafia, former men like Sam Giancana and others. They then are above the law because the Knights control the Justice Department, and they continue to flood every major American city in drugs, and nobody goes to jail except the low pushers.
Right.
So what the Jesuits are doing is they're conducting a drug war against the population of the United States, just as they conducted against the Chinese population in the 1800s.
Very interesting, and we can of course tie this in with the war in Afghanistan. I mean, we have a connection to the production of opium right there. I think after the Taliban was in there, allegedly the poppy fields were low in production, so to speak, but after the consequent invasion into Afghanistan, this is allegedly something that has started up again. Isn't that right, Eric?
That's right. That's absolutely right. The Taliban the leaders became disobedient, And so those leaders were overthrown so that the drug trade could continue growing the opium poppies out of Afghanistan. And now I think it's 70% of the world's production of opium comes out of Afghanistan. Well, that's the Pope's drug trade. And the other thing we must remember is trillions of Federal Reserve notes and other currencies are made during this drug trade. And so how is all this money laundered? How do they get this money deposited and then used for their black budgets and other things? It's through the international banking system.
Right.
So like the Bank of Nova Scotia, Citibank, Chase Manhattan Bank, all the major Deutsche Bank, all these major banks are run by the Knights of Malta, and they have certain front Jews working for them, who are high Freemasons, like the Rothschilds and a few others, and Greenspan and whatever. But these are just court Jews for the Pope, fronting for the Knights of Malta and the Knights Templars, high Freemasons, as they control the banking system, so they can launder all these trillions worth of monies made in the drug trade.
And they are using also, I think, this, the all the political correctness that is surrounding, the anti-Semitism. We have racism, of course, and anyone who is looking at anyone or if there is some racial difference, then every single time racism is brought out or anti-Semitism is brought out. And this is a way to kind of keep things from ever being looked into in a proper manner, I feel, at this point.
That's correct. One of the designs of the Jesuits is to, one of their goals is for the destruction of the North American Jews. There's 6 million of them in North America. They all got to die. Just like 2/3 of them died in Europe. These Jews here in North America, they've got to go because they can't have a successful, unified fascist state with a bunch of Jews because they're just, for the most part, not going to go along with it. So they have to all go to concentration camps. Well, the question is, how do you get them there? You have to foment discord in the country in order to justify putting the apparatus in motion to get rid of them. And what they have done now in this country is they have used certain of the Pope's court Jews to create a terrible racist country, because the blacks in this country are the greatest hatefully racist people that I have ever met. The vast majority of American blacks hate Americans, hate white people, and this hatred is being fed by the media. It's an incessant hatred. That hatred fuels all the black-on-white crime in this country, where I estimate at least 5 white people are killed a day by the hateful, what I call the majority savage blacks in this country, which constitutes 75 to 80% of the American blacks, whereas 20 to 25% of the American blacks are civil blacks. They don't hate white people, and most of them believe the Bible, and they too are killed off by these savage blacks in the major cities. Well, the Jesuits in control of Masonry have fueled this. They don't punish criminals. They don't punish people that commit crime with handguns. If it was my country, I wouldn't have any handgun laws. Everybody can own a handgun. Everybody can carry. But you commit a crime with a handgun, you commit armed robbery with a handgun, you die. You shoot somebody with a handgun, you die. You commit murder with a handgun, you die. You start implementing the biblical maxim of capital punishment with this 1% or so of the population that continues this criminal activity, and you wouldn't have a problem. While at the same time, you would have an armed population that if a foreign invader was deciding to invade your country, he's going to say, well, all of those Swedes, every last one of them are armed. They're all carrying handguns. They all have rifles. They have a low crime rate because they kill their murderers. They punish crime there. We can't invade Sweden. This is exactly what they've done with Switzerland.
Right.
This is why Hitler would not invade Switzerland in World War II, because all the Swiss were armed. So what they have done here is they've created this horrible black-on-white crime in this country for the last 50 years, since no later